Okay, now that we finished the main game and all the videos, we now get to the occasional Gears of War DLC. It's never a real guarantee that Gears of War will get story DLC like your Assassin's Creeds. I mean, you'll definitely get the multiplayer DLC every time because it's pretty easy for the teams making these games to simply touch up, recolor, dress up, and resell the Cold Train skin over and over again because people like the Cold Train. But story DLC is a lot more work, which is why Hivebusters seem to release weirdly late from the original release of this game. And I know that people are probably going to point out, well, obviously they have the continuing support from their campaigns or their seasons or whatever it's called, their operations. They're at the 5th one right now, so technically, I mean, they're continuing the life support of this game, so it makes a bit more sense than it actually sounds. But even with that in mind, the weirdly late release of this game is definitely shown by the completion achievements that I've been seeing while playing it, because only about 3 to 4% of the entire Xbox One player base of this game is actually hitting those achievements, which is pretty terrible for a AAA game, but it's definitely not unheard of for a DLC for a video game that people aren't talking about in spite of its continued support. Let's just say that Hivebusters isn't exactly necessary DLC like your old Hunters, and I'm sure lots of people decide to skip it because of the price point, because they're not playing the game. I mean, it did release with a $20 price tag, and maybe that fact shoved some people off of buying it, since even for AAA DLC, that's kind of a high price to ask. However, I am sure that whatever this cost to make, it probably made its money back anyway, even with a 5% purchase rate at that amount of money. So, since we don't get to talk about these sorts of things every day, let's pop the cork on this and see what we actually get inside the Hivebusters story. The DLC starts off with the new team getting dropped off to investigate a possible Locust sighting combined with a downed plane right at the start, the plane that they happen to be in. The usual shtick for video games, and this is where we get to see probably where most of the budget was spent on. The location of this DLC is located on some random island chain that I don't even think has an official name to it. I think it's like Southern Island or something. And the Locust have apparently not been able to infiltrate this for this long, but there is still a local islander population that still lives there, so, you know, it could be either way. In spite of giving points to the original game for them being able to ditch the iconic muddy browns and grays of the original trilogy, I was still super impressed by the level design of this DLC. The islands are lush, they're full of foliage, they actually have some animals living there, there's vine-covered ruins all over the place, and then you get to contrast that with the COG facility that we have to infiltrate later, and the Locust tunnels that they have to explore because, spoiler alert, the Locusts do eventually manage to get onto the island. Big shocker, I know, in a Gears game. And even though Gears 5 was the game to finally start putting the color back into Gears, Hivebusters really took that ball and ran all the way down the field to score a home run with it. It makes the setting of Hivebusters beautiful in such a way that really only Assassin's Creed could dream of being. It's really fantastic to see, and it really shows while this DLC must have been expensive to produce at this high level of production value, it really was damn sure worth the effort. It really helps to be in an interesting location to make the DLC stand out from the game it's attached to, and give the player a small reason to continue moving forward. Okay, I know, they're not exactly new recruits, but whatever. Rather than bringing back the new cogs from the main game, Hivebusters decided to hand us a brand new squad to play as for the mission. Keegan, who is the team's leader and an old member of the Onyx Guard, a veteran from the old cog during the first Locust War. Lonnie, the fish-out-of-water local guide for the team, which is an odd paradox, and the person who butts heads with Mac, the loud JD-like Australian who's out helping the cause, but does things really just his own way. It's an odd mishmash because each character is totally different than the other, and they don't seem like they jive all that well, and you really do get the sense that all of them are both completely new to each other and were drafted completely out of nowhere to come to this backwater island for some unknown reason, but they still manage, even with their differences, to work together to find some common ground and be snarky towards each other and start developing some sort of friendship. In spite of having no experience together, they really are working hard to forward this mission and manage to pool their strengths together to start covering the other's weaknesses and beat the impossible odd of such a mission being handled only by the 3 people who are themselves, 2 of which have very little experience fighting the Locust militarily. It's actually a surprise who's the oddball out on that one. However, while the scripts handed out were pretty good, they were pretty much on the same level of lighthearted quippiness that was seen in the original game, where you have characters who are goofily arguing with each other, and they make jokes in the faces of the horrors of alien conquest that they're fighting against. What really sets this DLC apart is that the actors they brought in for the main characters outperform the new cogs in all cases. Rather than being the typical broad American accents that you usually see in these AAA shooters from the usual suspects. I mean, you still get that from Keegan. His voice actor is really just doing another rendition of the too old for this shit black guy Militario we've seen a whole bunch of times in, movies and other games. But he does it pretty damn well, and he leads a team with a passion and also manages to fit that excellent Burnside mustache to a T.
Juvies roasted him. Heavier swarm. We didn't have the punch we needed. You got anything stronger?
And while I love Keegan's performance, he's really outdone completely by Mac, whose amazing Australian portrayal makes him just pop off the screen. He's brash, he plays by his own rules, he's completely unpredictable, and believes the ends justify the means, even if it flies in the face of whatever protocol that Keegan is trying to build into him.
Right. Sorry to be late and all. We survived a horrific condor crash, fought an endless horde of monsters from hell, and barely escaped with our lives, but how's your day been?
Mac's character is brilliant, and he's a great counterbalance to Keegan's lockstep military ideals. Lonnie is great in her own way, but she more often than not is just the voice of reason between the 2 extremes, and she works to try and keep the group together and focus on their mission, trying to throw out the arguments and finding the solutions which work well to bring their mission to life is what she brings to the table. She also brings an in-depth understanding of the island and the people who live there, and through that, she's able to help better get the toxins than the butting heads of Mac and Keegan, which they eventually need to nuke the Locust Hive that lives here on this random island.
Wish I could have been there for you, Mac. And your son. But I'm here now.
The 3 of them are really great characters, and their conflicting traits and opposing goals make them a very interesting team to watch and try to take on the Locust threat all by themselves, because they butt heads, but they're still trying to work together. They're just trying to find solutions through their different viewpoints. That gives them the ability to think outside the box, come up with new solutions to their changing mission, and escape hatches when they need them the most, or when one of the guys technically is trying to betray the team and what it's trying to do. So yeah, that's why the story is kind of interesting, is because it's unpredictable just by the nature of the 3 characters they wrote into this story. The 3 of them even go further during the ending mission to show why they're better characters than the regular COG squads, in that the Coalition wrote Team Scorpio to essentially be the Gears of War's B Company, and for those of you who know nothing about the Bad Company duology, B Company is essentially a military group in that game where anybody in the army who fucks up in amazing fashion is assigned as a last resort to B Company, and that group is then used to go on incredibly stupidly risky missions because the army does not care about your existence anymore, other than you just being cannon fodder for their flights of fancy. Each member of the 3 in Team Scorpio has major regrets that led them to being headhunted by Hoffman for this off-the-books mission to annihilate the Locust. The three then share this information during the last mission, because they've been bonding together through all that time, in which they have to hunt down a sacred bird of legend who has the poison that they need to build the Locust nuke. Keegan is a man with regrets in his old life because during his time with the Onyx Guard, he basically just stayed behind in capital cities for his entire time with the military, doing guard duty for important, very back-of-the-line COG figureheads, and he really never saw any action, which is why he manages to be a lower rank than Lonnie, in spite of being a part of the COG for about 4 times as long as she has. Lonnie used to be a part of Brash Company, a group working on Locust disposal after the original trilogy, but during a mission in a small civil war on Syria between the Outsiders and the COG, she somehow managed to kill her superior officer, and she was then court-martialed for that action, because obviously. But then, during the time that she was in prison, she was surprisingly released from it to serve on Team Scorpio, which is incredibly weird. And speaking of such, Mac is the oddball of the group because he used to be civilian class before this mission, having unfortunately been one of the victims of a Locust invasion on his village, which is what killed his entire family, and he joined Team Scorpio to get his revenge on the Locust living on the island, which accounts for why he's such a flying off the handle dude who lives on the edge. It's because he came here intending to die on this mission, fighting the Locust as some kind of twisted death wish to avenge his fallen family. Let's just say he's not in a good mental place right now, but over the mission, these characters who have fucked up and fallen on hard times have really bonded together on this rogue mission, and will come out of it heroes on the other side if they, survive. And they will have struck a hard-won victory for the COG against the rising power of the Locust using only their gumption and just scraping by, somehow defeating an alien army with the fact of just being 3 people, which is amazing. Okay, so how did their little off-the-table operation turn out? Well, the first thing that happened was they were getting flown into this war-torn area in a video game, so obviously it crashed and they had to go pick up the pieces. Thankfully for them, only the Carmine pilot died, since this turned out to be a rogue operation, and all the DB robots that were with them were burned in the crash, but they didn't really need them because they have the native badassery of any of the other COG. And after being taken back to base to meet Hoffman, legendary hero from the original trilogy, which is why when I saw him, I didn't remember him for a second, even though Keegan is just kissing up to him like a motherfucker. Team Scorpio after that finally gets their actual mission. They have to infiltrate a local COG civilian lodging facility in order to nuke the Locust nest that had formed from an old Locust disposal pit using a chemical bomb developed by Hannah, daughter of Coltrane, who in contrast is actually intelligent, technical, and most importantly, not annoying. The 3 of them then go on the usual slog of fighting through the Locust horde that live in there. They plan on going 20 stories down in order to bomb the correct spot to hit the entire Locust army all at once. However, after the stress of the many run-ins that they have with the aliens in that facility, they manage to reach the 3rd floor before Mac decides to piss all over the entire mission, steals the bomb from Keegan, and tosses it down an elevator shaft way above the actual objective they're supposed to be at. The 3 then manage to escape the deadly cloud, and because of some weird circumstances regarding the volcano that the facility was built on, they somehow end up on the vault door of the facility, using it as a boat to escape a lava flow, which is pretty intense and kind of funny because how the fuck did that even happen? The team manages to escape their lava-filled disaster, and then they decide to yell at Hoffman about this mission, and he admits that his allies have gone rogue and are no longer listening to the COG because the First Minister hated his hive-busting idea, which Team Scorpio was supposed to do before Max screwed over the entire thing. She wanted to use the DBs to do the same thing, but of course, the DBs are easily defeated by the Locust and are then taken over to be used as their soldiers. In Gears of War, the First Minister can never be right about anything. That's just a fact. Another plan is then formed to locate the legendary creature that Lonnie's people know about, who was the one that threw all that acid on the beach during their first mission that instantly destroyed any locust around it. Lonnie takes Team Scorpio to the village where her family lives, and after a short intro section, we figure out that everyone in her village has been annihilated by the locusts before they ever got there. So we get to go through a nice power fantasy mission with the Silverback to mow down tons of locusts in a revenge manner, constantly screaming at them to die, and then die in hell again. However, an accident occurs where Hannah, who was sent on that mission with Team Scorpio, didn't keep her guard up during the fighting, and she got abducted by a snatcher who escaped through the lava tubes under the island, which the team then figure out is how the locusts started infiltrating these island chains, because of course, they're super important to their military ambitions. I don't know why the fuck they give a shit. After tracking down the Snatcher and then getting evac from the underground, Lonnie finally has an actual clue to where the legendary creature is. They have to go back to the ruins they passed by earlier and then follow her culture's spirit guide trail to find where it is, since facing the legendary bird in person was part of their culture's initiation ritual. Throughout that whole flight of fancy is when they start sharing those personal details and start becoming closer together while they're traveling to the giant tree on the island where supposedly the creature lives. This involves some shootouts in the ruins and on a couple of boat trips similar to the lava trip that they took earlier. It actually gets a bit intense, especially since the run-in at the ruins has a mix of some of the most horrible enemies they could have picked to throw together, and it's just a complete mess of failure. So, after they managed to make a 90-mile trip in 45 minutes due to amazing editing prowess, we finally come across the acid-spitting bird, the game's only boss battle, and I guess it's pretty good. The regenerating health kind of neuters the whole thing pretty badly, and its weak spots to shoot at are annoying. Plus, it has to be designed for the 3-person team because co-op multiplayer was included with this as per tradition. So, while the fight is kind of a bit interesting mechanically, it's not actually all that challenging in any way, which isn't really an ideal ending for the DLC. Yeah, for some reason, in spite of the critical path saying that after this, Team Scorpio gets deliberately kidnapped by the Snatchers in order to avoid doing the trek down the 20 floors of the facility on foot, we don't actually get to finish nuking the Locust Hive. The DLC simply ends after the legendary bird kill, which is really strange since Gears games usually end on big, high-octane shootouts against the most elite and interesting Locust soldiers. The DLC ending in the middle of the story before the big nuke scene, and they don't even show the big nuke scene. I mean, what the hell? It just feels completely out of place, just like God of War 2017's ending on the Ash placing instead of a boss fight with Odin or somebody else who's big and bad and angry. The characters were so good in this DLC that getting that sort of ending ended up giving me crazy goddamn blue balls for a possible second Team Scorpio story. It really is some of the best Gears content I've seen in a while, and I just need more of it. It's too good to let it sit on some half-assed ending like this. This off-the-beaten-path story from the behind-the-scenes of the war that less than 10% of players bought is some of the best Gears content that we've had in a while. Probably better since that time I played Judgment. The characters are brilliant, the story is fast-paced and goes through a bunch of locations that are colorful, completely different from each other, they're full of life, and they provide some really challenging shooting to enjoy. Really, there just isn't much about this DLC that I don't like, other than that terrible timing of the ending, and probably the 4th mission to Lonnie's village because it was a bit too wordy and it was a bit too slow. It's weirdly paced, but I really do think that the Silverback back-end part of the mission really made up for the slow start of it. For $20, I think it's a bit too short. I think that $12 to $15 probably would have been a better price for this, since I really just got done with this in about 3.5 hours. The content in it was fantastic, and I would definitely like to see Team Scorpio in something else, but $20 is kind of pushing it a bit for what I actually got. Anyway, if anybody out there watching this video has invested in Gears 5 from last year, I would like to tell you to come back and drop the cash to check out the antics of Team Scorpio. It really will make your afternoon. Anyway, thanks for watching, and I'll see you guys around next time. Hopefully you'll agree with me on that scoreboard. Have a good night.